Well, time to take off again. We'll be leaving shortly here. This is Albany Yacht Club. Uh, Small little place. Uh, it wasn't too bad. It was a pretty nice area here. Uh, I didn't really do anything or go anywhere. I kind of just stayed there at the yacht club since I was only staying a day and then moving on the next day. Uh, and from here, we are probably between 2 and 3 miles from going into the Mohawk River. Now, once you're in the Mohawk River, you are basically going to be starting the Erie Canal. Um, this is what I didn't even notice. It took me. I was here over a day by the time I realized this is a ship, and it's a Navy ship. It looks. I'm not. I wasn't in the Navy, so I can't tell you exactly what it was, but it does look like it would probably be something like a destroyer or something like that. It's not very big, but if they wanted to camouflage it, they did a good job of it because I didn't even notice it. I was here a whole day, and it was only the second day that I noticed this thing was even sitting there. So I'm going to get a little bit closer as we're leaving now, and you'll be able to take a little bit better look at it. But it's not painted like you would think, a Navy vessel would be painted, which is gray. Uh, this was actually like a middle of the color blue, and then even a lighter blue on there. It wasn't white, as it looks white, but it's not. It's a very light blue color, and then a darker blue color. And I said when I was standing at the docks when I first got here, I didn't even notice it. So it took me a while. By the time I realized, I said, "Boy, that's a ship sitting there." Um, but anyway, we're going to go ahead and now start our trip to the Erie Canal, which, like I said, we're 2-3 miles away. Uh, Here's a bridge I hadn't seen before. It looks like it's a bridge that's lifted, but I had never seen one that looking like this, where they had the cables going into the middle, and then I guess the cables roll up, and as they're rolling up, they push the bridge itself upward. Mm. Uh, it looks like it could be from the center. I don't know. I'm not familiar with it, but I had never seen this before. I'd seen a lot of lift bridges everywhere. They have them all over the place here in New York, but this one looked kind of different than the rest of them. But okay, let's move on. Uh, the next thing we'll be going to, like I said, is in 3 miles. We're going into the Mohawk River. We'll be leaving the Hudson River. We are still at the Hudson River here, and we do have to go through a lock before we get on the Mohawk. Now, this next lock is actually a federal lock. It's not part of the Erie Canal lock system. So, once we get past that one, then that's when we start the locks that are on the Erie Canal. And there are 35 locks, I think, I'm going to have to go through. When you start the Erie Canal to the end of the Erie Canal, it's 35 locks. Now, at one time, when they were building the Erie Canal and they were building the locks, there were in a reference of I think, over 80 locks. And as time went on, they eliminated some of the locks. Um, the first set of locks that we're going to go through, this is the federal lock I was telling you about. So this is not actually, this is still in the Hudson River. But shortly after this one here, we're going to turn into the Mohawk River, and then that's when we run into the other locks, the Erie Canal locks. Now, the first set of locks in the Erie Canal, there's a total of 6 locks within a span of maybe a mile and a half. So they're real close together, and it's one right after the other, and it's gonna lift you or bring you up 150 feet of elevation within a matter of 6 locks, and one right after the other. And then after that, then they get further spread apart. Uh, it's kind of. I asked a question to one of these lock masters here that, why do you need 6 locks? Why couldn't you have done it with 2 or 3 locks? And he said, well, because there's too much pressure, plus it would take forever to be lifted, from one lock to, if you only had 2 or 3 locks, it'd take forever to bring the water level up that high. So what they did here is they did it there was one that wasn't even, as they were opening the gates, I could see the other lock. So that's how close they were together. And again, here, when you're going through the lock system, I'm not going to go through the whole thing. I'm basically going to just come in and hold on to the line, and then I'm going to edit out, most of the raising and everything, because, it's the same thing. It is like all the other locks. Not a whole lot happens. You're holding on to a line. The water's coming in. It's lifting the boat. You can see the water line there, so that's how high they're going to lift the boat up. And then once they lift you up to that height, they will open up the other side of the gates, and the gates will open, and then you're allowed to go through. Now, when they're filling up the tanks, or when they're filling up the locks here with the water, they don't open a gate where one of the water starts flushing in through the gate or something. What they do is these locks are built where they have some kind of system underneath them that allows the water to come in, and you can see the little swirl marks when the boat is lifting. You can see the swirl marks as the water is rising. What I'm going to do is I recorded one video of from start to finish going through the locks, and also you'll hear me talking to the lock master, asking permission to go through, and then he's talking back, answering my questions, and a lot of it has to do with there are 2 little stations, one on each end of the lock, which control the water and the lock systems and the doors and everything. And when they close one, they're in one station, and then once they close that gate and they make sure that it's secured, then they walk the distance to the other end of the lock, and then they start to open up that lock or the door so that you can go through. And just like here, you can see the little stations on the right hand side as we're going out. Those are the ones that control the lock system, and they have one on each side. You can't control the whole lock from one end. You have to actually work one end by opening and closing the gate, and then walking across the lock to the other side and working that little area over there to either drain or raise it, or raise the water. Once that's done, then they just open up the gate and you're allowed to go through, just as I'm going through now. They all basically work the same, except I did run into one lock that didn't have swinging doors like these do here. They actually had what they call a guillotine style door that would come down and close off the lock. And I thought, well, that was pretty interesting because it was different. All the locks that I'm going through have doors that swing open, except for this one particular lock. It had, like I said, a guillotine lock, or a guillotine door that came down from the top, and it closes off the lock, and then it starts filling up with water. So that was pretty interesting to see, because it was different. It was different than all these other locks that we're going through now. And you can see here, you have that little station here on the right hand side. That's where the guy is right now, and he's controlling, the doors and how much water comes in and all of that. And they do it from each side. Uh, you might be hearing some fireworks. Today is the 4th of July, so that's why you might be hearing some of the fireworks in the background here. But anyway, now we're going through, and after here, it's not very far away. We're going to go into the Mohawk River, and that's actually, there's a sign when you turn into the Mohawk River. There's a sign there that says Erie Canal with the arrow pointing toward the Mohawk River. So once you get past that one sign, now all of a sudden you're in the Erie Canal. So now I'm not going to show uh, all the locks that I'm going through. I'm only showing you one or two, and then that way you can kind of see how the lock systems work and everything here. I am going to show you one other lock, and this second lock that's on the Erie Canal is actually was the deepest lock in the world. It brings you right almost at 40 feet at one time. And for a long time, that stood as the record for being the deepest lock there is. And it's this lock that we're coming into now. As you can see, it looks pretty tall from where when I'm coming in, and it is. It's kind of, once you're in there, you don't see nothing in there. You can only look up and see the clouds, and that's all you're going to see, because there's nothing to look at, because the walls are so high. And you kind of makes you think, well, how high is it going to bring you, or how fast is it going to bring you up? It does bring you up pretty good, pretty fast, but it doesn't do it where your boat is bouncing all over the place. I do have a video of going through one of these locks from beginning to end, and I think I'm going to post that one video separate, and I'm going to post it without taking out the audio part of it, so that you can hear when I'm talking to the lockmaster, and the lockmaster's talking back and giving me instructions as what I have to do and everything. So I'm going to post that right after this video here. I'll post that video without deleting the audio, so you can hear everything that goes on when you're going through a lock. Fairly simple, and they're all the same. The procedure is all the same. If you have the stations on the right hand side, like you can see on top there, you can see the little stations where they work the lock stations there. If they're on the right side, then when you come in, you want to be on the left wall. And the opposite is, if the stations are on the left side, then you want to come in and hang on to the right wall. And the reason you want to do that is because they want to be able to see you as you're coming in and as they're lifting you, to make sure that everything is going okay. And in case of emergency, if they have to stop the water or something like that, they can easily stop. And that would be, let's say you lost the line, and the line came loose, and now you're just floating in this canal here, or in the lock. They want you to be tied up to one of these lines that's on the wall. They want you holding on to one of those lines, so that the boat's not just going all over the place. Now, if you're the only one going through the locks, and you do happen to kind of get loose a little bit, it's not a big deal, because there's no other boats that you can hurt and damage or run into each other. One thing I did notice when I was going through these locks is that you don't want to get behind a big boat. And that happened to me because I came in and I grabbed a line, but I didn't grab a line too far in. So when the bigger boat came in, he came on the opposite side of me on the other wall, and he moved in front of me. Well, the problem with that boat is that he didn't shut off his engines. He kept running. He kept using his twin engine screws to go ahead and control, try and keep his boat off the wall, instead of using, he did have fenders and everything. You can see the guy now is walking over to the other station, to the other end. Now, once I'm already all the way up, Now he's going to be able to walk to the other station, and he's going to open the gates so that I can go ahead and pass through them. Uh, but as I was saying, if you uh, if you get behind a big boat uh, and they don't turn their engines off, they can have you bouncing all over the place, especially when you've got a small boat like I do. Just the thrust from their propellers, uh, they're they're pushing you all over the place. Which what happened to me is this big boat came in after I did. I was first, but because I didn't go all the way forward, like right now, if you look, I'm not all the way forward, uh, and they actually had to wait for this bigger boat to come in. I was wondering why they weren't lifting me up or closing the gate, and that was because somebody else had called in and let them know that they were on their way and that they wanted to pass through. So they decided to go ahead and wait for this guy. So I was sitting in there for quite a while without wondering why they weren't, locking me through. And it was because they were waiting on this big boat that had called in. It's not that big of a boat, but it was still a pretty good sized boat. And like I said, he didn't turn off his engines. He kept them running, and he was maneuvering the boat, trying to keep it off the wall. And because of that, I was behind him, and his prop wash was bouncing me all over the place. So I kind of learned a lesson that next time I come into these locks here, I want to be the first one versus being, a big boat, and I want to go as far forward as I can, so that the other big boat, if a big boat should come in, he can't be in front of me. He'll be in back of me, and as long as he's in back, he can play with his, twin propellers all he wants. It's not gonna push me around because I'm in front of him now. So I learned a good lesson. So next time I figured, okay, always go all the way forward when I'm in the lock, so the bigger boats can't come in and push me around the way this one boat. And you'll see it here. It's probably on the next lock where this boat came in and did that to me. And like anything else, it's just lessons that you learn. There's the lock master. He just kind of checking, making sure everything's going okay. He normally says thank you for coming through and says hello or something. Some of the information that they want to know is they want to know your registration number, and that's on the boat. Normally they just write that down. They have a piece of paper and a pen, and they'll write down the registration number of your boat. They want to know what size it is, and of course this one's a 22 footer. So as I'm coming in, I normally just yell out at them 22 feet. And then they write down the registration number that's on the boat. And the other thing that some of the locks have asked me how many people on board, but I don't know why they need to know that. But it's no big deal. I just tell them just one person. That's it. Now these locks that I was talking about, I went through 6 locks in one day, and it took me almost all day to go through them, mainly because they were so close together. They were within 1.5 miles of each other. And here's the next lock, and I think this next lock might be the one that was the deepest in the world. For a lot of years, the Erie Canal had the deepest lock in the world. There were no other locks that were as deep as this one, and it was just a little bit under 40 feet. And so what happened is they built another lock somewhere in Europe. Here it is. This is the big lock right here that I was telling you about. It's over 40 feet or under 40 feet that they're going to lift me here. And you can see how big this thing looks as you're coming into it. Now, when they built this thing back then, whatever time they built it, like I said, it was the deepest canal in the world, or lock, I'm sorry, the deepest lock in the world. And like I said, it bring you up 40 feet. The total of the 6 locks that I went through within one day and within a matter of a mile and a half brought me up from sea level 150 feet. So you can see how quickly the elevation started changing as I was heading into the further inland I went. And on the other, the other videos before, you could see the mountains and all of that. Well, that's where the sea. That's where I was basically heading. I was going up mountains, and they were lifting us all the way up. Uh, this one here, this particular lock here, like I said, is the deepest, and you can see how big it is. And for a lot of years, it held the record of being the deepest. But then sometime back, they built a lock in Europe, and we're not talking about it beat this lock by feet or by yards or anything like that. It was only in a reference of about 6 inches, maybe even 4 inches deeper than this lock here. So this one no longer became the deepest one. There was another one in Europe built, and a few years after that, they built one lock in China that was also beat the other lock, but only beat it by a few inches also. So even though this is now the in third place as far as how deep these locks are, it's still not that far away from first and second place. You're only talking about inches here. And that was from one of the lock masters that I had an opportunity to talk to him about it. He says, yeah, we're not the largest or the deepest anymore, but the other 2 locks right now that only beat us by, we're only talking about inches, not even a foot. So it's still pretty impressive to go through this thing here. And it's pretty high. It was nice. But anyway, we went ahead and went up and went out on these. Now, they also had a lot of these right here. These are not locks. What these are walls to control flooding. These come down like a guillotine style, come down and hold back water in the event that they need to for flooding. A lot of times they hold them down to fill up a certain area if it gets too shallow. Now, here's one of those that is down, and I'm calling in right now to have them raise it so I can go ahead and go through. So you're going to see them raise this thing right now, and you can get an idea of how they work. Right now, what it's doing is it's actually blocking water from coming in from the other side so that they can control how high or how deep an area is by using these barriers that you go. And there's a lot of them, especially right around the lock system. There's a lot of these barriers all over the place, and most of them are open. As you're going through, most of them are already open. This one happened to be locked, so I don't know if they were testing it maybe, or just making see if it's making sure it was still working and functioning the way it's supposed to. But for some reason it was down, so they went ahead and you can see they're lifting it right now. And once it's lifted, then they'll go ahead and give you a green light. The way the lock system works here is they have red and green lights. When you see a red light, you're not allowed to go into the locks. You're supposed to stop and wait for a green light. Once the light changes from red to green, then that allows you to come into because sometimes they don't talk to you on the radio and say, okay, come on in now. What they do is they just switch the light from red to green, and that kind of basically tells the boater, okay, you're clear to come in, go ahead and come on in. So as you're coming into these, most of the time you're going to see the red light, and you have to call in and you have to ask to go through the locks. And as long as you have a red light, you're not allowed to get close to them. You're supposed to stay a certain distance away from them. That's because when they're opening the floodgates, or they're pushing water out of the lock, it does create some kind of a wake or something on the opposite side of the locks. But here we go, going out. This was and like I said, the deepest lock for many years. So it's now the third deepest lock, but the other two only beat it by inches. So it's still pretty impressive to go through this thing here. I've noticed one thing about the Erie Canal has been widened twice, I think, since it was originally built. And every time they widen it, obviously they change the material that they use, because it was newer technology, newer materials when they changed it. Here's a pretty good sized lock here that we're going to go through. And again, you can see that's the dam right there. That's what controls how much water comes in and out. And every time you see this dam, every time there's a lock, there's also a dam there. And also there's a power station. They use hydropower to make electricity to serve the area. And some of the powerhouses are there. There's some of them are still working, and you can see them working. You can look through the windows and see them working. Or if there's nothing going on, you can ask the lockmaster about them, and he'll open up the door and let you see it. And yes, I happened to see one of them, and it was still actually working. He says, no, this one is still producing electricity, but not producing enough electricity that it does the whole town, but it does provide some electricity. The majority of it comes from hydropower. So a lot of these dams here, not only are they raising and lowering you on because of the elevation, and so that you can continue going, but a lot of them are built with the dams so that the water can flow through the dam and turn the generators and produce electricity. And here we are once again, just going through a lock. So a lot of these locks are the same. Now here's that boat I was telling you about that got in front of me. So I didn't I deleted the part where he kind of was tossing me all over the place, because it wasn't bad, but it's still, he should have really realized that, hey, you're tossing me. If he had any courtesy, he would have shut off his engines. He did have fenders on his boat, so it wouldn't have damaged his boat to stay on the wall. But it was a big boat, and I know they're expensive boats, and he's trying to keep away from the wall. But he doesn't realize the problems he's creating for small boats behind him. If he would, or maybe he just didn't care. I don't know whether he realized what he was doing or just didn't care. The fact that he was bouncing me all over the place, because he does create a prop wash when he's doing it, and you can kind of see there the water, some of the prop wash that he's creating. So I'm kind of holding on pretty tight to the line now, because he's pushing me around. He's trying to control his boat by throttling up and down on his engines, not realizing, I don't think he realized that, hey, you're forcing the small little boat to bounce all over the place. But anyway, I got through okay, but I learned my lesson. Next time when I come in first, I go all the way forward so that the bigger boat cannot be in front of me. He will have to be behind me. And by doing that, I don't have to worry about the prop wash that they're creating. Even though I don't know whether, they're supposed to have their engines off or on. Them creating a prop wash, you would think is something they shouldn't be doing. And here he is taking off first. But he left his engines on the whole time. And that's what I'm saying, is that you can see some of the prop wash he's creating there. And you can see my boat bouncing around. That's part of his prop wash. So I kind of fought that wall the whole time I was going up because of that. Uh, so after he left, I went ahead and passed him just to stay away from him, and I figured, and to also beat him to the next lock. I wanted to make sure that next lock I was going to, which wasn't too far away, I wanted to make sure that I was going to be the first one in that lock so that I could move all the way forward and not have to worry about his prop wash anymore. Uh, he's got, twin engine screws, and I'm sure he probably can run faster than I can. But most boaters don't run at full throttle if they're making a long trip, mainly because it costs a lot of fuel, a lot more than what it's costing a lot of fuel anyway right now. Uh, my budget, again, as I mentioned before, has doubled. And I'm kind of like, well, is it going to be more than double or a little bit over double? I think right now, the way everything looks, I think it's going to be over double the amount that I had for budget. And it's not because I miscalculated or I just figured wrong. It's because of the gas price. It's getting ridiculous. I mean, in some areas, I'm paying $6.75 a gallon. Okay, and even though I'm still running, relatively small gas tanks, I'm running twin 16-gallon tanks, and I have a 5-gallon portable tank that I'm carrying with me. Still, when I fill those two tanks up, and I don't even fill the spare one up, the 5-gallon spare one, I'm not even filling that one up because it's just the price is so high. It's still costing me $180, $190 to fill up the two 16-gallon tanks. And that's every other day that I basically have to pick up fuel. So this is kind of the first part of the beginning of the Great Loop. So we'll see you later. Bye.